I went to visit my daughter at the house I had given her as a gift. When I arrived, the house was rented to another family who told me I was admitted to a private mental institution, but that's what saved me. My daughter was always my greatest source of pride. I dedicated my life to her, and when she got married, I gave her the house where she would start her new life. Years later, feeling nostalgic and with a heavy heart, I decided to visit her by surprise. But what I found was a reality I never imagined. A new family living in that house, and an absurd story circulating about me, as if I had disappeared from the world. The pain of that day destroyed me, but it also awakened me. It was there in that cruel shock that I began to understand how much my story had been distorted, and how much I still needed to fight to rebuild it. Today I am living proof that even after being erased, a woman can rise again with dignity, courage, and self-love. I'm so happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end, and comment from what city you are watching so I can see how far it has reached. I arrived with a light heart, almost dancing among the dry leaves on the sidewalk. The garden looked the same, the gate still creaked, and even the smell of the neighborhood brought back happy memories. The house I gave Emily as a wedding gift was my symbol of silent love. She deserved that home. I rang the doorbell with a wide smile, imagining the tight hug I would receive. But the person who opened the door was an unknown woman, with a cordial and surprised expression. She wore an apron stained with flour and held a child in her arms. I blinked, confused, trying to understand if I had made an absurd mistake. Maybe I had stopped a street too soon, or gotten the numbers wrong. "Excuse me. I'm looking for my daughter, Emily. This is her house," I explained, trying not to seem intrusive. The man who appeared behind her frowned, concerned. "This is our house, ma'am. We bought it months ago," he replied. My smile wavered. The world spun slowly, as if each of their words took time to fit together. I tried to laugh, convinced that something was wrong. "Are you sure this isn't your daughter's house?" The couple invited me in with disconcerting kindness. "Emily Sanders Hartley, right? She's the one who sold us the house," said the man, who introduced himself as Tom Ryder. His wife Melanie added. "She explained that she needed to go to Paris with her husband, and that you wouldn't be here anymore." I sat on their sofa like an invisible intruder, listening to details that seemed part of another life. "Emily is in Paris. They seemed excited about the move," Tom said. I felt my stomach drop. Emily was in Paris? Without telling me anything? And why were they talking about me as if I were out of the picture? "They said you were institutionalized. In a clinic," Melanie said softly, as if she didn't want to hurt me. I widened my eyes, feeling the blood drain from my face. This was a terrible misunderstanding. A cruel joke. An administrative error. "She said you were institutionalized." I stumbled down the porch steps as if fleeing a burning house. My hands trembled and my throat felt closed, dry of everything, even words. I walked aimlessly down the sidewalk, with the painful certainty that something was broken between my daughter and me. I sat on a random bench and cried. I cried like a lonely child, like an abandoned mother. I had given her everything, including that house. I wondered if I was dreaming or experiencing a late delusion. But Tom and Melanie's words were real and cut like ice. If Emily was really in Paris, why would she lie about me? Why didn't she contact me, warn me, or even write a letter? The emptiness I felt was greater than any physical pain. I looked up at the sky, searching for answers. Why would she erase my existence? I called Emily the very next day, with the foolish hope that it was all just a misunderstanding. But Cliff answered. Always too polite, always with a cold veneer. "Emily is unable to speak right now," he said. I insisted, cried, pleaded. He remained unyielding. He sent a message later. "She needs absolute rest. She's undergoing treatment. Trust us." My trust was a house on fire. I tried leaving messages, sent texts with words only a mother would use. No reply came directly from her. Just short, evasive messages, as if there was an invisible wall between us. I called Emily's old friends, but they all said she was fine. Just very busy. But how could she be too busy for me after everything? How could a daughter so completely silence the mother who raised her? Cliff called again that night, with an almost theatrical voice. "Emily is recovering. Trust us." The next morning, I went to the bank where I always had my joint account with Peter. I wanted to review the house papers, the old contracts, something to prove to myself that I still had some form of presence in real life. But when I handed over my ID, the manager looked at me cautiously. "Just a moment, please," she said. After a few tense minutes, she returned with a strange expression. "Your account is frozen. Because of a court interdiction." I stood still, listening to that as if it were said in another language. "Interdiction?" She nodded, almost with pity. "Ma'am, you need a guardian to move this." My body went cold. The words sounded like a sentence. Someone had declared that I was incapable of taking care of my own life? I had signed papers for decades, educated my daughter, organized a home. How could someone decree my incapacity like that without my knowing? "Ma'am, you need a guardian to move this." I ran from the agency as if I were being chased. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my mind, which seemed to be crumbling. I then decided to go after the house documents. At the registry office, I asked for a copy of the deed and received the final blow. The house had indeed been sold, by a power of attorney signed by me. But I never signed anything. I wasn't at the registry office, I didn't give any approval. That was impossible. I asked to see the signature. It was mine. And it wasn't. The handwriting looked similar, but something was wrong. My name was there, but not my presence. It was as if someone had impersonated me. "That was your signature, ma'am. Everything is regularized," said the clerk. I left with the papers in my hands, feeling the ground disappear beneath my feet. A forgery. A betrayal. A crime. But I never signed that. I returned home with shaky legs, my chest burning. Everything I built, my daughter, my home, my dignity, seemed to have been ripped from me without a fight. I sat on the sofa as if it still belonged to me, but it was already part of a crumbling world. I was alone, without a voice, without power, without proof. The only thing left was my own memory, and the certainty that it didn't lie. They sold everything as if I didn't exist. I tried to find some comfort in faces from the past. I visited old family friends, neighbors from milder times. In each reunion there was an awkward silence, an uncomfortable hesitation. Some hugged me, but with that look of someone who thinks they are in front of a miracle. Others, more sincere, asked with genuine surprise, "But weren't you institutionalized?" My heart tightened more and more. The lie had spread like sweet poison. That was the last straw. Emily not only erased my physical presence, she wrote another story about me. She branded every old bond with the idea that I was mentally lost, secluded in an invisible place. By what right did she spread this? What else would she have said? I reviewed photographs in familiar houses and realized how my absence had become irrelevant. I was swallowed by a fabricated narrative, and no one questioned it. That night I returned home feeling a weight on my body, as if I carried a name that was no longer mine. Still, something inside me screamed that there was a truth to be unearthed. I decided I could no longer live in doubt. I needed to see the documents. But weren't you institutionalized? At the registry office, I requested copies of everything involving my name and the supposed interdiction. The attendant hesitated, asked for time, made calls. She returned with a brown envelope and an undecipherable expression. Inside there was a psychiatric report stamped and signed with my name at the top. It stated that I was incapable of managing my life, that I showed signs of chronic confusion. I opened the last page and to my shock there was a digital signature. Mine. The handwriting was perfect. A cold reflection of what I know as my identity. "This is the official document, signed by you, ma'am," said the attendant, almost as a warning. I felt my eyes burn. The signature was there, but not my soul. I had never been before a psychiatrist, never been evaluated. This was a legal charade. And the worst part, it was being used to silence me. "This is the official document, signed by you, ma'am." I left the registry office stunned, my hands trembling and my face hot with indignation. I sat on the nearest bench in the center of the square across the street, among people going about their lives, unaware that I was being erased. The world seemed to be moving too fast for someone trying to prove they still existed. I looked at the falling leaves, the children running, and felt like a stranger there. Everything was in order except me. The forgery was a punch, but what crushed me was the silence. How did no one suspect? How could everything move so smoothly without me? I breathed, walked, thought. But on cold papers I was just an invalid number. The pain pierced me in silence, as if my emotions no longer had a place in the real world. If they took away even my sanity, what's left for me? I returned to the street of my old house without knowing why. Perhaps searching for an echo of what I once was, a shadow of my history. I leaned against the rider's gate, just to look at the garden that was once mine. It was then that I noticed a woman observing me from the other side of the fence, with an expression mixed with concern and curiosity. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then gently she approached. "You look lost. Do you need help?" I hesitated like a child before a new teacher. But there was something in her gaze. It wasn't judgment, it was attention. I nodded, too weak to hide it. "I'm Marjorie Sanders. This house. It used to be mine." She introduced herself as Laura, the neighbor. She said she had noticed my despair, that she saw me walking frequently down the street. "Sit down for a bit," she offered. We went to her backyard. For a moment I felt human again. There was something safe there, a space that didn't demand explanations from me. Laura was a psychologist. She had a calm, unhurried way of listening. I told her fragments of my story, trying not to sound crazy. She listened to everything without interrupting. Then, with a firm and empathetic tone, she said, "You're not crazy, you're just being silenced." I cried. For the first time, someone didn't try to shut me up, correct me, or doubt me. They just saw me. "You're not crazy, you're just being silenced." In the following days, Laura began to visit me discreetly. She brought tea, books, and a kind of care that wasn't laden with pity. She started asking questions about Emily and Cliff, about the documents. She said she had already noticed some strange attitudes from them when they moved in. "They always avoided talking about the previous owner," she commented. Her intuition began to align with my pain. For the first time I had an ally. It was Laura who said aloud what I couldn't formulate. That there was something criminal in all of it. That it needed to be investigated. "They may have silenced your voice, but they cannot erase your truth," she stated. She was willing to help me to find out what had really been done to me. For the first time I didn't feel alone. And that changed everything. "They made a mistake by leaving you alive and lucid." It took days to find someone who would tell me anything true about Emily. Laura suggested I look for old contacts of hers, and that's how I got to Helen, a college friend who lived in Lyon. The number was still the same. When she answered, I heard her cheerful voice, surprised to hear from me. I only told her I wanted news of my daughter, without mentioning everything that was happening. She hesitated but eventually gave in. "Emily is fine, yes. She's living in Paris with her husband." My heart tightened, my fingers went cold. Helen spoke about Emily naturally, describing dinners, trips, and a new circle of French friends. "She seems happy," she said. Every word pierced me with a mix of relief and pain. Then, Helen paused for a moment and gently added, "But she never talks about you." The silence that followed was devastating. I, who lived for her, was now an erased memory, an inconvenient shadow of a past she wanted to forget. I hung up with the feeling of having received a cruel confirmation. Emily was alive, well, and completely distant. There was no hospital, no institutionalization, just the silence of a daughter who chose to be absent. The lie, I realized, was not to protect me. It was to exclude me. "Emily seems happy, but she never talks about you." 2 days later, I received an unexpected call. It was Cliff. His voice was cold, calculated as always. "Marjorie, we need to talk. Emily wants to see you, but in a controlled manner." Controlled. That word hurt me more than any other. I accepted, even trembling, and he scheduled a video call for the following night. I waited for hours in front of the computer, adjusting my hair, tidying the room, like someone preparing for a family reunion. When the screen lit up, my heart pounded. Cliff was there, impeccable, with the same polished smile as always. Behind him, I saw Emily's outline, sitting in silence, her eyes downcast. "She's undergoing treatment," he said, before I even spoke. "She can't talk to you right now." I stood motionless. I wanted to call her, say her name, remind her who I was. Cliff interrupted. "She needs peace, and contact with the past could harm her." Tears fell without my realizing it. "She's undergoing treatment, she can't talk to you." I waited for him to end the call, but suddenly Emily looked up. Her eyes were cold, distant, as if she saw me without recognizing me. Cliff tried to stop her, but she moved closer to the camera. "Mom," she said in a firm, emotionless voice. "You don't understand. Taking you to Paris would be impossible. You don't fit in there." I tried to answer, but she continued impassively. "It was easier this way, Mom." I felt the world shatter in silence. The images trembled, my own breathing seemed like a distant noise. Emily concluded, "You have to accept it. We've moved on." And the screen went black. "It was easier this way, Mom." I stood before the reflection on the monitor, staring at the woman I had become. I was no longer the gentle mother who waited for letters and visits. I was a shadow of someone who loved too much and was rewritten by the very person who should have supported her. In that moment I understood. It wasn't just betrayal, but emotional extermination. Emily and Cliff had erased me for convenience, like someone deleting a file. I took a deep breath, feeling the pain transform into contained fury. "We don't have space for your past here." Laura brought me the first concrete light after so much darkness. She listened to every detail of the conversation with Cliff and didn't hide her indignation. "We need proof, Marjorie. Documents, anything that shows you are still who you say you are." That's when I remembered James Conway, my husband Peter's former lawyer. An honest, reserved man, but one who always inspired trust. Laura offered to accompany me to his office. When James saw me, his face expressed genuine surprise. "Marjorie?" I thought. "Well, that you were out of touch." I smiled sadly. Everyone thought so. He listened to everything in silence, leafing through old notes, until he found a file with my husband's name. "Peter trusted me. He was loyal to the end, and he wanted you to be protected." His words made my heart beat differently. For the first time I felt I wasn't completely alone. He was loyal to Peter to the end. James opened an aged leather folder and pulled out a copy of a document I had never seen. "Peter left a will," he explained. "Everything in your name, the house, the investments, the insurance." It was a gesture of love, of gratitude. I was speechless. "But Emily never showed me this," I whispered. He took a deep breath, running his hands over the papers. "The original was in the safe. And it disappeared." My whole body went cold. It was the missing piece to understand the deception. Someone had erased not only me, but also the desire of the man who loved me. My mind spun in circles. How many layers of deception were left? James swore to help me. He said there were still copies, traces, signatures. "They may have hidden the original, but they cannot alter the documentary truth," he stated. Laura, who was watching everything, squeezed my hand firmly. I trembled, but it was from a new emotion. Lucid anger. This was not just pain, it was the beginning of a battle I didn't know I could still fight. The original was in the safe. And it disappeared. Back in the simple house that now sheltered me, I spread the papers on the table. Dates, names, seals, everything formed a map of my own history. James promised to open an investigation, and Laura would follow every step. I looked at those documents and saw in them more than letters. I saw my reconstruction. What they tried to erase was coming back line by line with a force they couldn't control. The interdicted woman began to be reborn. I was no longer a confused mother seeking solace. I was a woman willing to confront the system that erased her. The truth was my only heritage, and I would have it back. I looked out the window, the sun touching the leaves of the borrowed garden. For the first time, I felt a thread of peace amidst the ruin. And a promise within me. They will have to face me as I am, alive. The day I entered a courthouse again was the same day I felt my dignity slowly return. Laura walked beside me with firm steps and a calm voice, explaining what we would do. "Revocation of interdiction and patrimonial review," she repeated, so I would understand the weight of the words. The building smelled of old paper and contained hope. We delivered the petition, signed with trembling but convinced hands. It was the beginning of my return to the legal world, the world from which they had expelled me. While Laura spoke with the judicial secretary, I watched people coming and going, each fighting their own war. I was one more among many, but there was something different about this fight. I wasn't seeking money, I was seeking existence. Laura turned and looked at me seriously. They won't accept this easily, Marjorie. You are touching structures they believe they have consolidated. I took a deep breath. I have nothing left to lose, I replied. And it was true. She placed her hand on my shoulder with tenderness, and for a moment I felt that I wasn't just a client. I was a woman being rescued by another. Her courage strengthened me, even though fear still lived in me. Be prepared, Laura said. They won't accept this quietly. Be prepared. They won't accept this quietly. The first response didn't take long. 2 days later, Emily and Cliff were formally notified. Laura showed me the copies of the summons, and for a moment I felt small. It was like causing an earthquake inside my own home. That same afternoon, Laura received a message on her cell phone from an unknown number. She showed it to me without hiding the tremor in her hands. You're meddling where you shouldn't, doctor. My blood ran cold. Emily had always known how to manipulate, but now I saw her coldness overflow. Laura took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. This only confirms what we are facing, she said. Even in the face of the threat, she refused to back down. If they are afraid, it's because they know the truth is near. That act of intimidation, which aimed to silence us, ended up becoming fuel. You're meddling where you shouldn't, doctor. At the end of that week, we returned to the courthouse to officially file the complaint. James accompanied us, bringing copies of the vanished will and the forgery report of my signature. The evidence began to form a body, a story with weight, with dates, with truths that could be measured. When the clerk stamped the protocol, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was the sound of my life being recognized again. I left there in silence, holding the papers as if carrying a new birth certificate. Laura smiled, exhausted but satisfied. Now, Marjorie, the tables have turned, she said. Those words echoed within me with a mixture of fear and hope. I was no longer just a woman shouting into the void. Now it's not just my word against theirs. Emily's reaction came faster than I imagined, and crueler. I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop. Messages, notifications, missed calls. Laura called me, distressed. Don't read anything yet, please. But it was too late. Emily had published a note on social media saying that I suffered from early dementia, that I was having a meltdown and needed medical help. Poor lady, the comments said. How sad to see a mother lose her mind. My chest burned. Every word was a silent stab, and the worst part, it seemed convincing. The photos, the stories, even the language used. Everything carefully planned to paint me as an unstable woman. Laura tried to control the damage, asking me not to respond. They want to provoke you, she said. But all I could think about was how many people were reading that and believing it. She's confused, poor lady. We need to pray for her. On the same day, James received an elegant invitation for a reconciliation dinner. He later recounted that, upon arriving, he found Cliff waiting alone in a luxurious restaurant. You're a sensible man, James, Cliff began with that tone of false camaraderie. You don't need to get involved in this. Let the women sort out their dramas. James listened in silence. Cliff continued, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were promises, positions, partnerships, influence. You can come out of this winning. Just keep quiet, he said with an almost paternal smile. The audacity was grotesque. Cliff believed everyone had a price, and that James would be no exception. The lawyer, however, did not respond immediately. He observed the man in front of him with the same analytical gaze of someone weighing a sentence. Cliff thought he was in control but didn't realize he was digging his own grave. You can come out of this winning. Just keep quiet. Hours later, James appeared at my house, his eyes firm and his demeanor determined. They tried to buy me, he said without mincing words. I told Laura, and together we sealed what was already implicit. We were on the same side. He began to prepare the formal deposition, gathering evidence of each manipulation, each altered document. It will cost my reputation, he confessed, but I can no longer sleep peacefully knowing what I know. I looked at him with gratitude. For the first time, someone other than Laura was risking themselves for me, for justice. The shame began to transform into strength. James promised me that when everything came to light, no one would doubt my lucidity anymore. Night fell and I looked at the sky, feeling courage grow in place of fear. She deserves justice, not silence. I was called to the courthouse for an informal deposition. The room was cold, windowless, but the silence weighed more than the air. As I waited, I saw Cliff leaning against the corridor wall, as if he were just a casual spectator. When I approached, he smiled, that same smile that always hit something. "Do you really want to expose yourself like this after everything?" he whispered without moving his lips. I closed my eyes for an instant, searching for strength in the depths of what was left of me. He always knew how to bend the environment to his advantage. He played with memories, with past guilts, with words that seemed like advice but were blades. "You're old, Marjorie. You'll get tired. Let this die in peace," he insisted. But there was no more peace in me, only truth about to be born. I answered only with my gaze, and entered the room to speak, with a trembling voice but my own. For the first time, my story had official ears. Outside, Cliff waited, impassive. He knew his plan didn't end there. What he didn't know was that I was no longer the same woman who had once blindly trusted him. And that, this time, I was not alone. "Do you really want to expose yourself like this after everything?" Weeks later, the attack came like an avalanche disguised as a procedure. Emily and Cliff filed a new request for interdiction. They brought psychiatric reports signed by specialists I had never met. The argumentation was cruel. They said I was disoriented, that I invented persecutions, that I suffered from intermittent delusions. There were even witnesses, paid neighbors, an old caregiver with a dubious history. Every line of those documents was an attempt to erase me once again. Laura read the papers with a lump in her throat. "They built an entire narrative, Marjorie. And there are people willing to swear it's real." James went into action, requesting counter-reports and reviewing dates. The signs of fraud began to appear, but the risk was real. One careless judge and everything would be lost. "She no longer knows what is real," one of the supposed witnesses said. But I knew, and that's what scared them. "She no longer knows what is real." Laura followed a lead. The name of the doctor who signed the main false report seemed familiar. With effort, she tracked his professional connections, until she discovered that he worked in a phantom clinic registered by a shell company, linked to a distant cousin of Cliff. The web revealed itself to be disgusting. James compiled the proofs, printed and stamped each piece of evidence with surgical precision. Now the fraud was visible, touchable, undeniable. They tried to isolate me, but it was in that confrontation that I found my true strength. The fear was still there, but now mixed with courage. We gathered in silence at Laura's house. She held the evidence, James the protocol. I looked at the mirror and said in a low voice, "I am Marjorie Sanders. I am alive. I am here." The next morning we filed the defense request. Now it's all or nothing. The courtroom felt colder than any other place I had been. My fingers tingled, and each step to the witness stand seemed to last an eternity. Emily was there, dressed in moral mourning, her eyes red like an experienced actress. Cliff, beside her, exuded confidence. The judge looked at the papers attentively, and then fixed his gaze on me with a neutral expression. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" he asked. My mouth went dry. For a second I thought I wouldn't be able to. But I looked at Laura, then at James, and then at myself, the whole woman who had resisted everything. I spoke simply, without embellishment. I told my story, the documents, the lies, the pain of being made invisible by my own daughter. I spoke of the house, the fake power of attorney, the lost will. I didn't cry. And it was that control that disarmed the ironic smiles on the other side. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" It was then that James stood up. With calm gestures, he handed the judge a folder with the original reports, authenticated signatures, and proof of the forgery. He spoke serenely, letting the documents speak for themselves. Then Laura testified. Her firmness surprised even Emily's lawyers. Ms. Marjorie never showed any signs of incapacity. What she suffered was a systematic erasure. The silence in the room was absolute. The judge examined everything with renewed attention. He turned to me. "You are not sick, you were betrayed." Those words, spoken by an authority, were like a lightning bolt illuminating my darkness. I felt my heart beat faster. The pain had not disappeared, but it had been recognized. And that was already a kind of healing. "You are not sick, you were betrayed." The next few minutes were like a slow-moving dream. The judge closed the folder, took off his glasses and said, "I revoke the interdiction of Ms. Marjorie Sanders with immediate effect." He requested a criminal investigation be opened into the documents previously submitted by Emily and Cliff. He also blocked all assets that had been transferred from my ownership. I trembled, but not from fear. It was the weight of justice finally falling upon me. I left the room under Emily's astonished gaze. She said nothing. Cliff simply stood up and left, with the same coldness as always. But this time he was the defeated one. Laura hugged me tightly and James, with a slight smile, nodded in silence. There, in that instant, something inside me was reborn. You are free legally and by right. I walked back to the street of the house that was once mine, with calm steps and a lighter heart. I didn't go to reclaim walls but to say goodbye to what no longer belonged to me. The garden still bloomed, as if nothing had happened, as if nature ignored human betrayals. Tom and Melanie opened the gate as soon as they saw me, with a sincere smile and kind eyes. "We thought you'd come. The garden misses you," Melanie said, offering a cup of tea. I walked to the magnolia I had planted myself years ago. I ran my fingers over the leaves, feeling the time deposited there. I didn't cry, not anymore. The pain was no longer current, it was memory. I sat on the stone bench and took a deep breath, like someone ending a visit to a symbolic tomb. Tom sat beside me and said with a sweetness that warmed my chest, "You are always welcome here, Ms. Marjorie." Justice ran its course like a slow but steady river. Emily was prosecuted for identity fraud, and the newspapers quietly reported the turnaround. Cliff disappeared before the second hearing. No valid address, no sign on social media. Like a coward fleeing his own reflection. I, at last, signed my name on real documents, regained access to what was mine, and rented a small apartment on a tree-lined street. For the first time, silence didn't scare me. I grew fond of the simple routine. Coffee in the morning, books in the afternoon, tea with cookies at night. Fear lost its grip, and in its place a timid but true peace was born. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. My existence was legitimate, and that was enough. One night as I closed the windows, I whispered to myself, "For the first time I have silence without fear." Laura, always present, came up with an invitation that took me out of my tranquility, but for a good reason. "I want you to talk to other women about what you've experienced. About autonomy. About silent abuse." I hesitated at first, but she insisted. "You can save someone with your story." I accepted because I realized that my pain needed to gain usefulness. In a few days I prepared my first speech, trembling as if it were my first day of school. In the modest auditorium, I sat behind the table and saw women like me, too silent for too long. When my name was called, I stood up with a racing heart but firm. I took a deep breath, walked to the pulpit, and looked into their eyes. I was no longer the silenced mother, nor the forgotten elderly woman. I was the woman who survived being erased. I smiled before I started speaking. This time it's my name on the door. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you experienced something similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story you'll also enjoy on the final screen, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.